going back to what I was talking about with experience for customers, it's the same thing for candidates. And a lot of people don't even think about that. They think that, well, I need to hire people who want to work for me because they want to earn money. Well, yes, but they also want to work for great people. And that is shown through your experience in the hiring process.
You just don't want warm bodies in there, just anybody that, like, what are kind of the top 2 or 3 things that you see when you come into a business that maybe that leader is doing that they shouldn't be doing or that they're struggling with the most?
Yeah, there's actually 4 areas. So I have a framework that I call LYFT, and it's an acronym. So leader, infrastructure, fuel, which is revenue related, and then team. So oftentimes the leader has to make some changes in how they operate. So like the questions that I said earlier, ask about if someone asks you a question, turn it around on them and say,
holistic. Like you need all those pieces.
Yes. And if you've never had someone like me come in to evaluate your business in that way, you will be, I mean, most of the time when I do these evaluations, these audits, I will come up with 50 plus recommendations just based off of some conversations with founders of their team.
So even if you're delegating all this stuff and you're working on all these things, where does the freeing up of time come in? Like, how do you not burn out? Hi, I'm Matt Levenhagen, founder of Unified Web Design, UnifiedLabs.ai, and the host of the Builders Podcast. Here on the Builders, our goal is to uncover the first principles behind building businesses, products, and services. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. And if you find value in our content, a like, share, or review is always appreciated. Let's dive in and explore the roots of innovation and progress together. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today, we are joined by Madi Waggoner. Welcome to the show, Madi.
Thank you, Matt. I'm delighted to be here. We've already had some great conversations so far, so I'm excited to have more.
Sorry, you weren't included, but we had a little fun before that we jumped on, and we're laughing a lot. So, but I think that'll carry into the episode. So, Madi is the founder of Building Remote.
Yes.
And we said we're going to make up a name like Chief Remote Officer or something. We're gonna come
something
up with
that.
Because just founder, you need something else. You need, founder and Chief Awesomeness Officer or something. Anyway, so Madi, tell us a little bit. Take about a minute. What do you guys do over there? What do you do?
Yeah, so I work with remote entrepreneurs to help them fire themselves from the day-to-day. Oftentimes, they get really tied into the day-to-day work of running their business, whether that's delivery, sales, et cetera. And there's a lot of things that we can do to help pull them out of that, give more work to their team, strengthen their team, empower their team so that they have time to be able to focus on other things like growing revenue and being able to take vacation, parental leave, those kinds of things. And so I help and my team helps with all of those different facets that helps them to be able to do that.
That's awesome. I'm going to need that someday.
There's a lot to it. And sometimes people aren't aware of everything that goes into it. And I love getting to educate on that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we'll get into that today. Before we get into that, though, where we like to kind of start is to learn a little bit more about you and your journey, your origin story. What kind of informs, what you're doing today and how you landed doing what you're doing today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been remote for 14 years, and a lot of the time has been spent in tech startups. And there's been so many different things that I've seen because I've grown with different businesses from mostly, like one in particular was really ground up. I was the third employee. We grew up to 20. And there are so many different things that I've learned just from being in all these different businesses. I've worked either in or with over 40 different entrepreneurs in their businesses. And because of the variety I've seen, I've been able to see a lot of different data points of where they struggle, what are the common issues, where does communication break down when remote teams start to grow, and then also how does that impact revenue? A lot of businesses have gone remote in the last few years, and so I'm taking the knowledge that I've had even from before COVID, before everyone went remote, and teaching that to other entrepreneurs and their teams so that they can strengthen. And that's a lot of the work that I've done just kind of by default with the person I am before I started my business.
So you're focused on the remote aspect of this. Because I mean, I've been online, doing stuff online pretty much full time since like 2005. But there are a lot of people now that just in recent years, they started doing a lot more remote stuff. So you're well positioned to help those folks. So how did you feel like I missed how did you end up in this space? Like, what did you do before what you're doing now? And even before that and before that.
Yeah. Well, my very first business that I had was actually an acquisition when I was 19.
Okay.
And I love saying acquisition because I didn't know what the heck that was when I bought the business.
Fancy.
It sounds fancy.
Yeah.
An old boss of mine used to joke that I've been in mergers and acquisitions since before, I was in college, and it just sounds really impressive.
Nice. Yeah.
But I bought a web design business. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was working by myself from home. And at that time, there just wasn't a lot of availability of resources to try and teach myself the things I needed to know. And since you're also in the web space, I was using Dreamweaver at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, not the best tool.
Well, I used it for a number of years too, until there was a guru PHP programmer that I was working with once, and he wouldn't let me use Dreamweaver. Oh. He got me into like PHP Storm and then other editors and stuff. There was artifacts in there he didn't like, and there was things that it was a whole thing. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I ran that for a few years, didn't know what I was doing, and ended up shutting it down. I went and did some marketing roles, and then I got into operations at my first tech startup. And I helped them grow a lot of different things in the business. This is the one where I was the third employee, and just did a lot with them over 3 years. I then went over to another tech startup, and at that point, I started taking on some side hustle freelance work with some online entrepreneurs, and that's where this kind of started, of more consulting with online businesses, and it's just kind of continued from there. I'm the type where I don't just wait for things to come to me. If I see someone, say, post about something on Instagram or LinkedIn where I know I can help them, I'll reach out and say, hey, I'd be happy to help you. And that's how I've gotten a lot of my highest paying clients over the years, because I'm reaching out to them when they're having the point of pain, when they need it solved. And so that's been kind of my journey, how I've gotten into that. Yeah.
So what's your learning journey though? Where do you think you did you go to college? Did you have jobs and stuff? Like, what job did you learn the most from? Because I'm curious where you got all this. Because you're like, I just was the third employee and I helped them, with operations. And like, where does all this come from? Is it just on the job training, on the fly?
Yeah, I did go to college. I got a business degree with a specialization in marketing, but I honestly forget that I have it, because I feel like I don't use anything I learned. Maybe there are some skills in there around learning, but I still feel like it wasn't the best experience. A lot of my learnings came from that first startup where I was accidentally muted myself. Whoops. Where what just happened
technical
there?
Problem.
That happens. Remote work, it happens. But in that first startup, I was there for 3 years, and I started out in customer service and just helping the founders with responding to questions and that kind of thing. And then I went from that into doing more of the sales calls. And this organization was teaching people who are not designers how to become designers. And we had small courses that were 4 weeks long, and then also a longer boot camp that was more for career changers. And so I got really invested in that because I loved seeing the journey of people going from something where they didn't enjoy their work. We had a lot of people coming from like the medical field, actually, and they didn't enjoy it. They were burnt out. They had maybe done it to please their parents because that's where their parents wanted them to go. And they weren't making as much money as they wanted in some cases. And being able to see their journey from not doing this work to doing this work, maybe depending on the part of the program, if they went full-time or part-time, 3 to 6 months. So like maybe 4 to 7 or 8 months, then they were in their new field, enjoying it, making more money. And I loved seeing that journey. So I was a part of the customer support, sales, in general. I eventually became the director of operations for that company. And I led our largest team at that point, which we still only had 20 people, but it was half the company was under my management. And there were so many things I learned there, from customer retention. There was a project that I led where I noticed that our retention was kind of low because we allowed a 2-week grace period where they could withdraw if they felt like it wasn't for them. And I looked into the data, did some interviews, and we made some changes to their mentor matching because they had one-on-one mentorship. And we improved our retention by 50% just with this particular change that we made. And so I've learned a lot about their experiences and onboarding and overall communication and how you have to consider the gaps that they might have as like newbies to the information. And so I led our team doing a lot of that different work. And I also got into doing a lot of automations with different tools like Airtable, Zapier, all of those because of we didn't have a large development team. And so it fell on the operations team to create those systems. And so I've learned a whole lot. I learned a lot about managing. That was by far probably the most impactful role I had as far as the different skills.
That's amazing. It's amazing how this feels like it's layered. Like you were in customer service and then, you learned a lot there. And then okay, we're going to do sales now. We learn a lot there. And then you just keep moving up and tackling new challenges. And somebody's like, she's smart. She should be over here doing this over here. We need your help. Come over here. Do you mind? I don't know if that actually happened.
Yeah.
But
yeah. I mean, I more volunteered.
You more volunteered. Like I want to do
volunteered.
That. Can I do that? Yeah. That's cool though. And so as you, keep building and learning through experience and all this stuff you're doing, and then how do you end up, like doing remote stuff? Like what's that transition? And you went freelance? Did you go?
Yeah, I was helping build out systems for an online entrepreneur who had previously been a teacher. And so he didn't have the background that I did of how do you build these systems? How do you create a great customer experience? How do you make sure that this doesn't burn you or your team out? Because the delivery of services and products and courses is way more involved than a lot of people realize from the outset, especially if you're starting to do it at scale, if your business is growing. And so there's a lot of things that we can do to streamline that, to make sure that it's a really consistent, feels like a white glove experience for the person on the other side, but it's more streamlined for us. And so getting into the remote work, it kind of started from that first role because I live in an area where it's not a tech hub. It's mostly like military here, actually. And so I was trying to find work. So I reached out to that company, and they oddly, I'd taken one of their design courses. I really liked it. I said, hey, I don't know, but could you guys use some help? And they had actually just posted that day for a job opening, but it was on the like New York Craigslist. So there's no way I would have ever seen it.
Wow.
And so that was kind of my first step into remote work as far as the experience. And just because of the way that I am, I'm a big connector. We were talking about, I like to bring energy and use Slack emojis and Giphy and all those things. I naturally did that. And so I helped to build our company's culture. And so I took that into these other companies I started working with, whether it was freelance or not. And when I started working with that first freelance client, I said, well, I understand part of the reason why the culture you want to build isn't happening because we don't have these places for people to express themselves or have connection or even communicate around work stuff in the best way. So I helped them to address some of those things. And I shared a lot of my knowledge about what I'd learned from being a remote manager and a remote project manager as well. And so we made some changes there, and I ended up working with that client for 3 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's get into like remote work a little bit. We're going to kind of dive into the how to not, like you already kind of mentioned, not getting burned out and because that business and a lot of businesses are complicated. They're hard, and behind the scenes a lot happens. It looks like, oh, I just got a course, but everything. What are all the things that are happening back there? There's the customer service piece, what are all the pieces that happen that we're missing when we take a course? I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So of course, there has to be, the material has to be created. So before it's ever launched, or if they pre-sell, they have to have some idea of what they're going to be covering. So there has to be someone developing that curriculum. And I had a client who they had been wanting to launch a course for 2 years when they started working with me. And they just didn't have everything set up to help push it forward. And we launched it 3 months after I started working with them. And the crux of the issue is that we had to get organized. So I sat down with the founders because they were the ones who needed to essentially get the information out of their brains. And I sat down, I said, okay, what are the main points in here? And I just asked them a lot of questions, and I created a curriculum plan just based on how they answered my questions, and I organized it for them. Then I put it into Asana, so we had it in a project management tool, and I broke it out into when they were going to create the material over time. And then while I was there, I was also interviewing their team to try to identify someone on their team who could essentially replace me in that function. I was doing it for the time being just to get them moving, but I wanted someone internally to do it. And I found one of their team members who stepped into that really well. She was totally underutilized. And so I coached the founders and that person on what that role was, how they needed to respond to that person, because she more needed to tell them what to do. And they actually found they were resistant at first, but they really liked it after a little while, because then it took some of that pressure off of them to figure out what needed to happen.
Right.
So she ran that project with me, and then we got it launched, and she continued to help them launch things after that. And so just even before the launch, those are some of the pieces. And that doesn't even touch on marketing, sales, and all the different emails you might get if you express interest in a course. Like if you sign up for a wait list or something, there might be a tag that gets added to your name so that people on the inside know when to or who to email, what list you get added to, or what time did you sign up, how many times are you clicking things. There's so many different pieces that you can pull in. And again, that's just even before you see any of these things as a customer.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. Everything you're doing as a customer is either being tracked or but there's a lot of work that goes into actually creating that content. And then, as a business, you're doing all kinds of things and to expect one person, even a founder of that company or that business, to just know everything and to have all the right skill sets and be organized, it's probably not, going to happen in every case. So so you come along and your goal is to, in that case, they just needed to get organized. They needed to use proper tools to actually manage the project and plan it. And they weren't doing that before. They were just probably overwhelmed by everything and didn't know where to go.
They needed organization, but they also needed accountability and someone helping push things forward. And I find that that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs need, because there's so many different directions they can go. There's this challenge, as being an entrepreneur, where there's so much freedom, you have so many options, but also that's the flip side of that is you have so much freedom, you have so many options. And so how do you focus in on the particular things and that you need to do to move your business forward? And sometimes that can become really overwhelming. And when I coach teams, I teach them about what it's like to be an entrepreneur, where they need to understand the decision fatigue and how often that happens. And when you continually ask your boss, how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do this? You're one person on top of everybody else that is asking them for things. Can you imagine how exhausting that is? And it's helpful if they're parents, because then I can say, you think about how your kids are sometimes when they're little. Mommy, 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 daddy, daddy, daddy. So take that and just take that into the workplace. And how would that feel to you, constantly having adults asking you for things? So I help them to shift their thinking and how they respond to their boss or client or whoever it is, to make sure that they're even more effective, that they take work and pressure off of the founder. And that was a whole part of this too, is that the founders didn't realize that could happen. And so I had to teach them, how do you essentially help create, I can educate your team, but you have to help create that culture. And one quick tip that I always recommend is, if someone comes to you with a question of how do I do this, turn it around back on them and say, how would you handle it?
I like that.
Yeah. It's a really interesting tool, how if you just keep repeating that, people understand, I'm not going to get the responses I need to try something first. So it changes your team to think more about being solution oriented. So they come to you with an idea already rather than a blank page, and you can give feedback and coach them. Or once they get really good with it, it's essentially a yes or no. And so you can do a thumbs up, thumbs down. It's a really easy way to alleviate a lot of the pressure off of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you're really teaching the team how to think for themselves and make their own decisions. And I kind of do the same thing with my team, and I don't know how it's received always, but I'm just like, go build it, make the decision. How would you do this? And a lot of times there's 10 different ways you could do something. Just how would you do this in the most efficient way, or with these benefits, and then they can come to me. By the time it gets to me, then I'm just looking at the solution, and maybe I tweak it and, et cetera, just check a box. That's awesome. Give it a thumbs up emoji.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's really, because as leaders, as a leader of an organization or whatever, you get all these people coming to you constantly. That does wear on you. And you have all these other responsibilities. And big thing with being a leader, you have the responsibility of making the right decisions and spending your time in the most high value areas you can, because you're responsible for the whole team and their jobs and their futures. Because if you don't make the right decisions, you're not doing the right things, or you're not moving that project forward, it's not getting done. Then you're going to be stagnant, or you're going to fail, and you're failing. Then you're failing your whole business and your team. I feel that responsibility sometimes too. Like, especially if we're having some challenge, whether it's a financial challenge or it's just some challenge within the company. It's like, I need to solve this because I don't want my employees to lose their jobs. I don't want to have to say, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to have you because we're not doing this now, or whatever the thing is. And so I know as a leader that's stressful, but I have to have the room to work on those things and not get too into the day-to-day stuff, the constant, micromanaging and worrying about, like, I want to give my team personally the ability to just, here's what we need, go out and build it. I'm not going to manage every detail. I may even look at something, I'm like, I probably wouldn't have done it quite that way, but it works. So it's fine. And so that's it. So you went in, you got them on track. They launched that course. They did better. You trained somebody else to kind of take your place. Is that kind of what you do with like a lot of companies?
It depends on where they're at. Yeah. I coach them based on my first step that I take when working with a client and their team is I interview them. And based on conversations and based on getting a little information around their tooling and that kind of everything that they have in their infrastructure, I can identify a lot of what one of my clients has said. I'm like a private investigator who finds low-hanging fruit. And so I find that low-hanging fruit very easily just in conversation. So I create a plan based off of that to either, if they decide not to continue working with me, if they say don't have budget or something, they can take that plan and work on it themselves, or they can work with me and I'll help them address it. But finding all of those different pieces, it just depends. There's definitely some common threads. But there are always some uniqueness. There's always some uniqueness to each company that I work with. So in some cases, it's a mindset thing for the leader of they don't trust their team and their team actually is very good. Or in some cases, it's they don't trust their team and there's very good reasons why they don't trust their team. So I might need to evaluate their team further and give them instruction. I once had someone, a founder I talked to, who they were really frustrated. They were still stuck in the day-to-day of everything. They were always stressed about money. Things weren't moving forward. Revenue growth was really only on this person's shoulders. And I started digging into it and I asked a lot of questions, but one of the questions I asked is, how did you hire your team? And they said, well, we needed help. And they were someone who was kind of around and said that they could help us. And so we hired them.
Kind of around.
Yeah. Yeah. They just were people who said that they liked their mission and wanted to help. And they've had these people on their team for years, and they're surprised as to why they're not seeing the results or having other people be engaged in revenue growth. And it's because they didn't hire for their actual needs, and they didn't hire to make sure they got the best, and they didn't follow a process at all. And so when I do hiring for clients, and I'm changing up my offers a little bit so that I actually give my systems to the teams that I work with and train them how to hire, because so many people don't know how to do it. And it has to be a very consistent process that you follow, from developing first getting clear on what you need, developing a job description that is aligned with that and also attracts people. We want to hire rock stars. A players. So we have to attract those people, make sure that we talk about benefits. And when I talk about benefits, a lot of people kind of get hung up on that because they're like, well, I don't offer medical insurance, or like, this is a 1099 role. I'm like, that's okay. Focus on, remote work. Is it fully remote? Are you flexible? Are you someone who wants to coach? Like for me, I have no qualms with encouraging and helping my team grow, knowing that they might leave, because that's just the nature of it. And I'd rather be a part of that journey. So I can talk about that. So the job description needs to be focused on that, and then having a structured application process, an evaluation process, an interview process. And going back to what I was talking about with experience for customers, it's the same thing for candidates. And a lot of people don't even think about that. They think that, well, I need to hire people who want to work for me because they want to earn money. Well, yes, but they also want to work for great people. And that is shown through your experience in the hiring process.
You just don't want warm bodies in there, just anybody that...
Exactly.
When you're talking to that, I have a specific example in recent history. I'm not going to name names, but quick pause to give a shout out to the sponsors of the Builders Podcast, Unified Web Design and UnifiedLabs.ai. At Unified Web Design, we specialize in crafting custom websites and offering complete design and development solutions to help businesses build a strong, lasting online presence. Now, through UnifiedLabs.ai, a project I'm really excited about, we're helping businesses tap into the power of AI and automation, designing smarter systems, streamlining operations, and building practical tools that actually work. From audits to implementation, we help brands navigate the AI landscape with clarity and confidence. Whether you need a custom website or you're ready to explore how AI can transform your workflows, visit UnifiedWebDesign.com and UnifiedLabs.ai. Now back to our show. I've done both things where, I like to, and I have an international team. So sometimes it's good to have referrals from your existing team to, if I need a project manager or something, or another developer, who do you know? And in fact, I have some friends that work together, right? I have a group of people that kind of know each other and they're friends. And that's kind of an interesting, great dynamic. And then there's different stages to it. Like sometimes you don't need somebody as experienced, or you just need somebody to, it solves a current problem. What I'm getting to is that I had somebody that I had gotten through referral, and she was great at the time. She did what the job required. And time went on, and she eventually left, and kind of the position changed and stuff like that. And but the next time I needed to hire somebody like her in that same role, we're at a different stage of the agency, and it was a really the situation now was a little more critical. It was important that I found somebody with very specific skill sets. And before, when I hired for this position, it was like, okay, somebody, great, bring them on in. I didn't go into great detail. I didn't really test them at all. Both of us knew about as much about the role as, which wasn't much. It's like, this is the first time we even have this role. I don't know. But the second time I was much more thoughtful, and I did not go by referral, and I had very specific criteria that I had for this person. Like specific experience that I needed. And if they didn't have that, we move on. Like I knew exactly, I had pictured exactly who would be best fit. And that turned out awesome. Like this round, it was like, now I don't want to ever lose this person ever again, because I don't know what I'd do without her. I don't know, somebody, if she's listening right now, you're doing great. But I don't know if she listens to this, but it was a much more, I realized that, maybe it's the stage of the business, maybe it's the particular role or whatever. Sometimes it is really important to really define it and stick to your guns, like really, not just hire the first. That's the other thing I did. I don't want to talk this is your episode.
But, this is great.
But the other thing that I did was, I made sure I had a number of people I wanted to talk to. And I didn't care if that first person I talked to was like, because I have the tendency to do that. I'm like, I really like this person and I'm going to hire them because I really like them. I don't need to see anybody else. But instead I said, I got to talk to at least X number of people. and then I'll go back and I'll pick the best one or two, and then maybe have them for a second interview. And that was also something that really made a big difference.
Yeah, that structure and committing to that process and making sure that you don't just go with the first one is part of my process. It's how I've delivered so many times for clients because I tend to do 10 first round interviews. So I might have 200 to 1,000 applications that we go through. We whittle that down to first rounds. And I do this in more of a sprint versus a just ongoing structure. Yeah. Because I want to be respectful to the candidates, and I also want to try and keep a tight timeline. And if we don't find someone by the end of that process, then we can start it over again or revisit. But we often do have someone. But we do 10 first round interviews and then 3 to 5 second round interviews. And the founder always does that last one because I want them to make sure that they're involved in this process, that they're hearing other people's answers, that they're checking for culture fit and that kind of thing as well. And a tool that I've given both to myself, my team, and to my clients as well is a rubricing system. We have this whole automated system that we've built, which is part of what I give to clients when we do this process together. And the rubric asks very specific questions for them to, or shares very specific questions for them to ask in the interviews. And then they take the notes and they score each candidate on their response to each question. And then it summarizes what the score was so that it takes a lot of that bias out. I'm all about culture fit, but I've seen way too many people hire based on how they feel about someone. And then they bring them in and they can't deliver. Yeah. So I created a structure to help with that. And, committing to that, like you said, is such a great way to, even if you at least commit to following through with all of the interviews, that can help so that you can make sure that you talk with everybody who got to that point and evaluate based on the group together versus one person.
Yeah, that's really important. It's a huge lesson. And and especially if you're busy and you need this person now, it's really easy to want to take a shortcut and just take that first person or something. But to have, because long term, there's definitely benefits. We're getting into hiring suddenly. Yeah. Let's pivot back to. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about, because I know this is kind of your wheelhouse, and this is. I know you're kind of into, you're focused on remote work and stuff, but you're also kind of focused on helping people get out of their day to day. And you said that, the first thing you kind of do is with every business, you go in and kind of audit that business and figure out because every business is different. They're going to have different issues they're dealing with that you can help with. Like, what are kind of the top 2 or 3 things that you see when you come into a business that maybe that leader is doing that they shouldn't be doing or that they're struggling with the most?
Yeah, there's actually 4 areas. So I have a framework that I call LYFT, and it's an acronym. So leader, infrastructure, fuel, which is revenue related, and then team. So oftentimes the leader has to make some changes in how they operate. So like the questions that I said earlier, ask about if someone asks you a question, turn it around on them and say, how would you do this? There's little things like that where if they're trying to delegate, we need to make some tweaks and help them understand how to step into that. I call this the solopreneur to CEO mindset shift because so many people get stuck in that where they started the business, they were having to do everything themselves, and then they haven't fully made that mental focus shift to operating like someone who has a team. So there's a lot of different pieces within that. Sometimes I might just have to encourage them. In some cases, I honestly do encourage founders to see a therapist for certain things that come up. The way that I am, things just happen. I ask very specific questions, and sometimes things come up. So they might have something that is tied to failure that they've had in the past that is impacting their more of a scarcity mindset. So that's the leadership. There's some examples there. Infrastructure is related to their tools as well as meeting and communication cadences. And what I mean by meeting and communication cadences is, are you doing regular one-on-ones with your team members? So one-on-one meaning manager to the team member. Yeah. Are you doing what I call quarterly momentum check-ins, which is essentially like a growth check to see how your team is doing? I keep this really simple, and I have people ask, what's working well, what's not working well, and what needs to change. And by doing that, it helps your team keep in this feedback loop of ensuring that they know what you're thinking. They're also thinking about their growth. And then it becomes this expectation that they're going to do this on a quarterly basis. So they know that at the end of the next quarter, we're going to talk about my growth. So I'm more motivated to make sure that I have something to talk about. And I actually, to your point earlier about how the role changed with that one team member, I also encourage that team members keep their job description and they add to it, like with the suggestion feature in Google Docs, for example, as they get new tasks that are added to their plate, because it helps to see the comparison. When I was at that first startup, I just did this myself. I told my manager I was just going to do these things. And by the end of different quarters, I had an entirely new job for 8 quarters straight, literally a different job every time. Startups are great for people earlier in their careers to learn a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
So infrastructure around those meeting and communication cadences, as well as their tooling, like project management tools. And if they don't have some of these pieces, there's some that my team will help them work on, or I'll connect them to another like agency, for example, who builds out like ClickUp, for example. I have someone, Tipped Up Ops is great for ClickUp build outs. So it's different pieces there. I don't cover all of this, but I will help identify it because I want to make sure that I surface things I see and help them get the right answers that they need. So that's infrastructure. Fuel, I don't focus real heavily on because I'm more of the operations side, but I have helped so many different businesses grow their revenue that there are, in some cases, they need like sales coaching, for example. So I have a great sales coach I recommend named Tyler Lindley. He runs a community called Client Makers. That's phenomenal for teaching different sales pieces. Marketing, if you have pieces there, like, or if you're just relying on referrals for your business, like that, I flagged that for a client recently. I said, this is a problem. We need to deal with this. And because you're just trusting that people will send work your way, and that's
Right.
not how you need to do this.
It's
You need
kind
to
of
have more of a flywheel.
little lazy way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I know enough to like identify things here, but I mostly on that angle, I try and push towards other people. Or in some cases, if it's the operational side, like if they can't take on more because they have too many things that are bogged down in their business, that I can definitely help with, and I'll guide them through on that. And then the last one is team. So do you have the right people in place? Do you have a hiring process in place? Are there people you might need to let go? Do you have a good onboarding and offboarding process? All of those different pieces around team. Oftentimes, most people don't even have an onboarding process, which is a really big failure. If you invest in hiring great people, but you don't do anything to when they start, that's going to fall flat. They're not going to be as effective as quickly as they could be.
Right.
And so I do a lot of teaching around that piece as well. So lots of different things within that, but those are the main 4 areas.
So what are the 4 areas again? Let's recap.
Leader, infrastructure, fuel. So that's like marketing and sales related, or delivery revenue related, and then team.
And so the infrastructure is what? Is that?
That's systems and meeting and communication cadences.
Systems and meeting. Okay. All right. I just want to get this all
There's a lot in there.
sketched out. That is, there's a lot in there, but it feels like those really all are holistic. Like you need all those pieces.
Yes. And if you've never had someone like me come in to evaluate your business in that way, you will be, I mean, most of the time when I do these evaluations, these I will come up with 50 plus recommendations just based off of some conversations with founders and their teams.
I have no doubt, because I know that if you did that for me, I would fail and probably 15 over there, 10 over there. Yeah. Because there's so many things, like we talked about earlier, when you're running a business, like there's so many things on your plate, so many things coming at you. But part of that is figuring out how to delegate and build a team that can take a lot of that stuff off your plate and stuff. And then how do you, I'm curious, because there's a lot so you come in and you help somebody, let's say you get that in place for somebody, but how do you ensure that long-term that's going to stay in place? Because a lot happens with the business. New things happen,
behavior change.
Business grows, and it's behavior change.
It's behavior change. It's behavior change for the leader. It's behavior change for the team. And it's also ownership. If we're instituting a new like project management system, if they haven't really used one in the past, then we make sure that we have someone who owns that. They are responsible for staying on top of it, for keeping it organized, for helping. Normally this is like a project manager, operations manager, depending on the size of the team. And they help to stay on top of other people of, are you getting your work done? And by having someone who owns that system and also enjoys it, it's much more likely that things are going to continue that way. Same kind of thing for meeting cadences. You could have someone like that, or a chief of staff or a virtual assistant who is responsible for making sure that those meetings don't get dropped off. And I communicate that to the team members. I say, your job is to help your boss make sure that they attend these meetings.
Yes.
And so it's different pieces like that. And when you have the team working together to hold each other accountable, it's much more likely it's going to stick.
That's like, so one of the things that is jumping out at me. So you mentioned one-on-ones before, right? The first number of years in business with this agency is, one-on-ones were super core to what I did, because I wanted to really develop the team, build those relationships, and give people an opportunity to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. And in the last year or two, I've gotten a little lax. I haven't been, because a lot's been happening. It's very easy to say, well, I think about it probably at least once a quarter. I want to do it. This quarter, we're going to do the one-on-ones, and then I don't. But I know the solution to it. All I have to do is have one of my VAs take responsibility for that and make sure those get on the calendar every so often. And I think I've had that conversation. I don't think it was ever really fully implemented. I know the person probably listening to this says, take note, please. I know somebody is listening to this, that let's have that conversation. but that's there's a lot of things that I know in my business that get done because I do have somebody that is holding us accountable to get those things done, they have ownership over that thing. And I don't have to worry about it getting done. And if I'm involved, it shows up, and they're virtually looking at me, and I have no choice but to handle it. That just made me think of that, because the reason I ask kind of how do you establish and keep these things going long term, because you can have a really good process for a while, but then chaos erupts, something happens in your business, and you get lazy, or it's just that habit of doing something falls to the wayside or is replaced with a different habit, maybe a bad habit or good habit. But I think that's something that, because there's so many things to just remember. Like, you almost have to have like some kind of AI bot or something to remind you of something. Every 3 months you revisit something, and it pops up and say, hey, Matt, are you still doing this?
Yeah. I mean, I've recommended that people do quarterly momentum check-ins for themselves. And you can essentially have a checklist of, am I still doing these things I said I wanted to do 3 months ago? If you get to that point and you look at it and you say, I haven't done any of these things. Okay, then maybe you have some kind of like time after your review where it's taking action on the things that you want to happen. And it could just be a time on your calendar every 3 months where you meet with yourself. And then the time after that is with an assistant to help you execute on those things. And the more that you can bring other people into it, and the more that you also are firm with certain boundaries. For example, I used to have a boss. Her name is Jody Yorg. She used to be a vice president at Yelp. So she knows what she's talking about and the things that I'm going to share here. Yeah. But she specifically said that when we have one-on-ones, I will commit to not moving them. You can move them, but these meetings are for you, and I will make sure that I'm available to you. If there's something that comes up, we will make sure that we have one that week, unless you specifically tell me we don't need it. So she makes sure that she commits to that, and she tells people that on the onset, especially when they're just joining the team, so they have that expectation, and then she doesn't move it. And so when you have that commitment, when you've told someone like that, something like that, and you want to make sure that you follow through, it helps to also reinforce that. So if you struggle with canceling things like that, which I've definitely fallen into that sometimes too, just saying it and committing to it can help other people to hold you accountable, just even in that mental way.
Yeah. So how do you, so even if you're delegating all this stuff and you're working on all these things, where does the freeing up of time come in? Like, how do you not burn out? Like, because that's one of the things, even as my team is growing and I give my team a lot of stuff, there's going to be more stuff. It just gets replaced by new stuff. Other things maybe are high value and it's great stuff and it's going to help us grow, but you can really kind of find yourself on this treadmill of just constantly doing stuff every day in and day out, how do you have those conversations with like a leader that is maybe even brings up the fact that I'm tired, I'm tired, I'm burned out. How can I fix that? How can I make more time in my day to day or my weeklies for me time or whatever, or if it's affecting family? What are those conversations like?
Yeah. This is where some of the therapy comments can come out because I'll ask questions about how does this impact your family? You said you have this many, you're married, you have this many kids. Like, how is this impacting them? Have they said anything to you about this? And helping them to just share some of the things that they've seen or have heard from their loved ones helps us to have a conversation around, okay, this is actually a non-negotiable to say, take time off, or during the summer, you stop work at this time. And it is, again, a habit change. We have to change how we think about things and then put processes and systems and accountability in place to make sure we act on it. And my personal story, which has helped to color some of how I think, is I grew up with a dad who was very much a workaholic. And I don't want to be that way. I know how that impacted me as a person. And so sometimes I'll tell that story, or sometimes I'll ask if there was someone in their life who acted that way. And looking at it from that perspective, rather than I have so much work to do, and then looking at it, comparing it with, oh, this is how I saw someone else, it helps to change how we think about it. So it's more of a conversation to start with. And then it's okay, what would you really like to do? Well, I would like to not work weekends. Let's start with, okay, so let's figure out what needs to happen. How much work are you doing? Let's track your time. Let's see where you're spending your time. And if you are taking on a lot of new things, maybe we need to have some kind of evaluation of if it's actually worth taking on. Or when it comes in, should one of your team members take it? Or is it something you should say no to? And I have an exercise that this is actually an interesting lead in that I'll share with anyone listening here that's called the Founders Focus Assessment. And it's actually a tool I use at the beginning of the hiring process, but you can use it anytime. And I recommend using it regularly to just reevaluate where you're spending your time, what work you're spending time on, and where your energy is as well. Because if you hate certain work and you keep procrastinating on it, but it needs to get done, maybe that's something that you could give to someone else on your team who's more passionate about it. Or maybe it's something that really, truly doesn't need to get done, and you can change your mind and decide not to do it anymore. That's always an option as well. So it's a lot of evaluation, a lot of conversation.
Yeah, you got to really assess a personal assessment of what you're doing. Because there's a lot of things you can add to your plate. There's a lot of new initiatives you could start. And all I have to do is just block a little time on the weekend, and I can do this extra thing. And I find myself like consciously, like if I'm spending time with my wife, right? We have every day, there's a time frame with my wife in the evenings. We have dinner, and there's time we spend together and before bed or whatever. And I work really hard not to think about the work in those time frames. Like I've made a decision. I don't care what else is going on, what other craziness is going on. This is the time for that. Or like this past weekend, it was Father's Day. That was this past weekend. I think
so. I'm thinking about it too.
Time flies. Sure. 1 or 2 weekends ago. And I spent pretty much, half the day with my father. It's a little bit of a drive, but up to that day, I'm like, wow, I'm going to lose that Saturday morning. I usually do, business stuff, and strategy and write a little content but just made a decision, man. My dad's not going to be there forever. He's getting up there in age and family matters. So, I'm going to make that time. And guess what? I survived. I did. I wrote that content a little later in the week, and you have to make that time, and probably building habits and assessing, what is important, what isn't important. Yeah, that's really important. So you have some kind of thing. What did you mention?
It's an assessment. It's called the Founders Focus Assessment.
Founders Focus.
I'll share the link, but it's buildingremote.kit.com/thebuilders, specifically for the builders listeners.
Yeah.
And if they sign up there, they'll get it instantly. It's just a exercise that I've used for years, and it works really well for just helping pull out. It's fairly simple, but most people don't go through this process. And so just sitting down and doing this regularly, sometimes that for different people who are going through a lot of growth, I would recommend that they do it quarterly. It's a similar exercise that I did when I was changing jobs essentially every quarter because of how fast we were moving. That if there's a lot of change, it helps to just pull it out and make things a little bit, just think about it differently. And it's always a good idea also to do what I call, well, a lot of companies call retrospectives. So you could do this, say, at the end of half a year, since we're recording right now on June 19th. So, by the end of this month, perhaps do a retrospective on, or at the end of the year, of what went well this year. What didn't go well? What do I want to change for next year? And most people don't take the time to ask these questions. And that's all that this is reflecting on if we're actually still going the direction that we want to be going. And the great thing about being entrepreneurs is that we can change our minds. We don't have to get clearance from some boss. We can decide to go a different direction. Now, we have to be responsible with the decisions we make, but we do have that option. And the business will change, we will change, the loved ones in our life will change. And so it's a good idea to do this occasionally to make sure that we're checking in. And it's good to use retrospectives for other parts of the business as well, like projects and whatnot, so you can constantly iterate and improve.
Definitely.
But I like to use it for these other uses as well.
Yeah, it kind of comes from I have a Scrum background, like Agile, project management and stuff. And that's kind of baked into that, as looking back and reviewing what went well, what didn't, and so on and so forth. Do you have any specific stories you can share as kind of a last thing here of somebody that's maybe you've helped? Because one of the amazing things about what we do is when we're helping something, like we're doing an audit or we're in somebody's business, and like what you're doing is seeing the results of that. Can you like cite at least one example, maybe two examples of somebody you helped that are now like doing so much better and it's impacted so many things?
Yeah. So my first client that I worked with, we're still in touch. I was on his podcast recently, actually. And
oh, nice.
When I was still working with him, they had their first child, and he wasn't really going to take time off. He didn't feel like he could. And they had another child recently. And his actually director of operations told me that he was going to be taking a lot more time off for that. And he said, when I asked him about it later, he said that there was just so much relief. He knows that he can step away and everything's taken care of. Yeah. And so that was one example. The second story was I worked with an influencer who is educating on some like different health things and was really overwhelmed with everything going on. So we brought someone in originally just to help with the overwhelm, but this person was so aligned with the vision and so driven that they actually created multiple revenue streams for this business and grew existing revenue streams. Wow. One that they created was like a intentionally low priced option, but just even that being low priced, it brings in like $50,000 a year. They had another launch, a single launch with like a partnership that was 6 figures, and just all of these different things. And so I remember talking to this founder, and she said, this is just amazing to see things happening without me really being involved or having to push it forward. And that's the magic of when you bring in fantastic people and have all these right systems in place, because you just find out about things after the fact and you see it happen without having to put in your energy in the same way. And it's just amazing. And one other tool that I like to mention too, people can find this on my blog actually, is called a weekly reporting. And it's a system that we put in place that the team actually fills out that covers things like wins, challenges or blockers, decisions that were made, things to be aware of, like for the boss to be aware of. And I love when people start doing these because they're like, I had no idea all this stuff is happening. And now that my team I'm empowering them even more, there's even more magic happening without me being involved. And I'm just notified at the end of the week. That's the kind of feeling that I see from a lot of the founders I work with, where they see this in revenue, they see this in their free time, they see this in their energy, they see this in not having to manage like emotions of their team because they're constantly in connection in a structured way, so it's not overwhelming, but they just feel this sense of freedom. They can actually have this like deep breath and sigh outward and be like, whoa, this is awesome. That's the kind of things that we see with our founders.
Yeah, that's an amazing feeling. I want to feel that more. I have, just like I mentioned, the person I hired recently, and she just took command of a lot of stuff, and things started happening that I had to worry about before, and I don't have to worry about anymore. And exactly. It's freed up my brain. It's less stress. I know things are handled, And even she's helping me with email and stuff now, and watching my inbox and helping me not have to worry about stacking up. And I look, oh, okay, I've let it go, and there's hundreds of emails in here now. I got to sift through. Those are all awesome things. Well, we could talk all day about this stuff, as I always say, because I love talking about business and everything, all this stuff. But let's land here. If somebody wants to learn more about what you're doing, you mentioned the one thing, and maybe you can repeat where they can find that, but also what your website is, how people can reach out to you. Where do you hang out on the World Wide Web? Somebody might want to connect.
So that resource is at buildingremote.kit.com/thebuilders. You can find our website at buildingremote.co, no M at the end. A lot of people misunderstand that. So .co. Yeah. And then I'm on LinkedIn. Post a lot there. I respond well there. So feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from anyone there as well.
Love you. I love LinkedIn. It's awesome.
It's great.
It's like my
meet so many great
home.
people there.
Yeah. It's really good. Anyway, well, Maddie, thanks a lot. Thanks for sharing all your insights. And we got into a lot of stuff, went off the rails a few times, talked about hiring for a little while, which is fun. But that's the fun of doing podcasting, right? Because we never know where it's going to take us. But until next time, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Builders Podcast. One more quick note about our sponsors. At Unified Web Design, we're passionate about doing better together, partnering with agencies and businesses to deliver exceptional web design, development, and ongoing support. And UnifiedLabs.ai is where we explore smart, practical ways to integrate AI directly into your website and e-commerce flows. From intelligent chatbots to marketing automation to back-end reporting, all with a strong focus on user experience and making your systems work smarter. If you haven't already, subscribe or follow to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, sharing it with someone who might benefit helps us grow this amazing community. Until next time, keep building smarter, bolder, and with purpose.